My name is Madison Taylor, and at 34 years old, I never imagined being excluded from my little sister Audrey's wedding. I had always been her protector, her confidant, her biggest supporter. But when the wedding invitation arrived with my name conspicuously limited to just the ceremony, I made a decision that changed everything. I booked a trip to Bali during her wedding weekend. What happened next shocked our entire family. Before I tell you what went down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. And stick around to see how this family drama unfolded. Growing up, Audrey was always 3 years behind me in everything. I remember walking her to elementary school, holding her small hand in mine as she nervously clutched her backpack with the other. The first time some 4th grade boys teased her about her braces, I marched right up to them despite being only in 7th grade myself and told them they would answer to me if they ever made my sister cry again. They never bothered her after that. As we got older, our bond only grew stronger. When Audrey turned 16, I spent weeks teaching her to drive in our parents' backyard, patiently guiding her through 3-point turns and parallel parking until she could do them in her sleep. When college application season arrived, I stayed up late helping her perfect her essays. Even though I had my own finals to study for, I was there for every teenage heartbreak, every triumph, every moment that mattered. Into our 20s, nothing changed. I became her emergency contact, her midnight call when dates went wrong, her Saturday morning brunch date. When her boyfriend Marcus broke up with her after 3 years together, I was the one who showed up with ice cream and tissues, who listened as she cried until sunrise, who helped her pack up his things from her apartment. When Audrey lost her marketing job during company downsizing, I helped her update her resume, practiced interview questions with her, and even paid her rent for 2 months until she found something better. Our weekly sister brunches became sacred ritual, a time when we would laugh, plan, dream, and support each other through whatever life threw our way. Then Kyle entered the picture. Audrey met him at a work conference in Phoenix, and from the very first call I received about him, something felt different. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 4 months, they were engaged. And Audrey was showing off a diamond ring that seemed oddly ostentatious for someone who had always preferred simple jewelry. The first time I met Kyle at a family dinner, something about him made me uneasy. He was handsome in a conventional way, successful as he repeatedly mentioned, and charming to our parents. But I noticed how he subtly checked Audrey's phone when she stepped away to use the restroom. I saw how he made small, barely perceptible comments about her dress being a bit tight, her laugh being a bit loud. The way he looked at me felt dismissive, as if he had already decided I was unimportant. As wedding planning began, Kyle's controlling behavior became more apparent. He vetoed venues Audrey loved because they weren't prestigious enough. He insisted on approving her choice of wedding dress. He had opinions about everything from the flowers to the font on the invitations. But whenever I gently pointed these things out to Audrey, she would laugh it off. "He just has good taste," she would say. "He wants everything to be perfect for us." Despite my growing concerns, I was determined to be supportive. After all, this was my sister's big day. I went out and bought every wedding magazine I could find. We spent evenings creating Pinterest boards of flower arrangements and table settings. I started putting aside money to help with the costs, knowing how expensive weddings could be. We discussed picturesque garden venues versus elegant ballrooms, debated the merits of buffet versus plated dinner service. I offered to act as an informal wedding coordinator, knowing how stressed Audrey could get. I researched vendors in our area, collected quotes from photographers and caterers, and created detailed spreadsheets to help Audrey stay within budget. My friend Julia was a florist, and I arranged for Audrey to get a significant discount on wedding flowers through her. The first real sign that something was wrong came when Audrey started canceling our sister brunches. First it was because she and Kyle were looking at venues. Then it was because his parents were in town. Then it was because she was just too tired from all the planning. One missed brunch turned into 2, then 3. Until our weekly tradition simply faded away. When I called to check in, Audrey seemed distant, almost guarded. If I asked anything about Kyle, she would immediately become defensive. Once, I gently suggested that perhaps he was being a bit controlling about the wedding plans, and she snapped at me in a way she never had before. I started noticing other troubling signs. When I emailed Audrey a list of potential venues I had researched, Kyle replied from her account saying he'd accidentally deleted them while cleaning up her inbox. When I called Audrey to ask about dress shopping, she told me Kyle had already scheduled appointments with designers he approved of. Decisions that Audrey would have once consulted me about were now being made without my input, often seemingly without hers either. But I kept telling myself it was just wedding stress. Couples got weird during wedding planning, right? Everyone knew that. It would all go back to normal after the wedding. I just needed to be patient, to be understanding. To be the supportive big sister I had always been. I had no idea how wrong I was. The bridal party announcement happened during a family dinner at our parents' house. Audrey and Kyle had invited both sets of parents, our grandparents, a few close cousins, and me. The table was beautifully set with our mother's best china, and everyone was in high spirits, sipping wine and chatting about the upcoming wedding. After the main course, Kyle clinked his glass for attention. With his arm around Audrey, he announced they wanted to officially ask their bridal party to be part of their special day. My heart swelled with anticipation. Despite the recent distance between us, I never doubted I'd be Audrey's maid of honor. It was something we'd talked about since we were girls playing wedding with pillowcase veils. One by one, Kyle announced the groomsmen. All friends from his private school days and college fraternity. Then Audrey, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, named her bridesmaids, 2 cousins, Kyle's sister Jasmine, and 2 friends from work. Then came the bombshell. Jasmine would be her maid of honor. The room went silent for a moment before erupting in surprised murmurs. I sat frozen, wine glass halfway to my lips, certain I'd misheard. But the pitying glances from our cousins confirmed what seemed impossible. I wasn't in the bridal party at all. Our mother looked between Audrey and me, clearly uncomfortable but saying nothing. Our father became suddenly very interested in his dessert. No one acknowledged the elephant in the room. That the sister who had been by Audrey's side her entire life had been completely excluded. I made it through dessert on autopilot, smiling mechanically and congratulating the chosen bridesmaids. Inside, I was crumbling. As soon as it was socially acceptable to leave, I made my excuses and drove home, tears blurring my vision the entire way. The next day, I went to Audrey's apartment, determined to understand what was happening. She let me in reluctantly, glancing at her phone as if expecting a call. When I asked her directly why I wasn't in the bridal party, she couldn't even look me in the eye. "I need supportive people around me right now, Madison," she said finally. "People who are 100% behind my relationship with Kyle." I stared at her in disbelief. "When have I ever not supported you?" I asked. "Kyle thinks you don't like him," she replied, studying her nails. "He says he can feel your judgment whenever we're together." My jaw dropped. I'd been careful to keep my concerns private, sharing them only with Audrey and only in the gentlest way possible. "He feels threatened by our relationship," Audrey continued. "He thinks you have too much influence over me." As she spoke, memories flashed through my mind. The time Kyle accidentally spilled red wine on my cream dress at dinner. How he would pick up Audrey's phone whenever I texted her. The way wedding decisions were made without consulting either of us, then presented as if they were Audrey's ideas. How he'd made comments to our parents about me being too overprotective, too single, too invested in my sister's life. "I know you think he's controlling," Audrey said, finally meeting my eyes. "But you're the one who can't let go. I'm getting married, Madison. Kyle is my priority now." Her words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. I fought back tears as she continued. "You're too opinionated about Kyle," she said. "Every time we talk, I can tell you're judging him, judging us. He's uncomfortable around you because he feels like you're just waiting for him to mess up." "Audrey, that's not true," I protested. "I just want you to be happy." "Are you sure it's not jealousy?" she asked, her voice taking on a hard edge I'd never heard before. "You're 34 and single. Maybe it's hard watching your little sister get married first. The accusation felt like a slap. ID never once envied Audrey's relationship status. If anything, ID been concerned about how quickly she'd committed to Kyle. Kyle feels judged by you, she continued. He says you look at him like he's not good enough for me. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life. I need people who can be happy for us, not people who question everything. I need my sister, I whispered. Then be my sister, not my critic. She replied coldly. Just be happy for us, Madison. That's all I ask. I left shortly after, tears streaming down my face as I drove home. That night, I pulled out old photo albums, tracing our history together through snapshots. Audrey and me building sandcastles at the beach. Audrey and me in matching Christmas pajamas. Audrey hugging me at my college graduation. When had everything changed so dramatically? I wrote in my journal for hours, trying to process the betrayal and confusion I felt. Sleep eluded me as I replayed our conversation, wondering if I had somehow failed as a sister. The next morning, red-eyed and exhausted, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My friend Grace came over that afternoon with coffee and sympathy. We sat on my couch as I poured out the whole painful story. This has Kyle written all over it, Grace said firmly. He's isolating her from the person who knows her best. Classic controlling behavior. But Audrey thinks I'm the problem, I said miserably. Grace squeezed my hand. Of course she does. That's how manipulation works. He's convincing her that your concern is interference, that your love is control, that your history together is something to break away from rather than cherish. She shared stories of her own sister's disastrous wedding to a similarly controlling man, how the family had walked on eggshells until the inevitable divorce 2 years later. Give her space. But don't abandon yourself, Grace advised. Be there without being a doormat. And in the meantime, let's plan a girls' night to get your mind off this mess. Despite my hurt, I couldn't just walk away from Audrey. That evening, I sent her a conciliatory text saying I would support her however she needed. I even bought a small gift for Kyle. A leather card holder ID noticed him admiring in a store window as a peace offering. I offered to help with behind-the-scenes wedding tasks that wouldn't put me in Kyle's way. Address envelopes. Assemble favors, whatever was needed. I told myself that I could remain supportive without sacrificing my dignity entirely. That I would still attend the dress shopping appointment with my mother and Audrey the following weekend. That this was just a bump in our relationship, not the end of it. I had no idea how much worse things would get. The Sunday family dinner following the bridal party announcement was excruciating. Our parents had always hosted these weekly gatherings, but now Kyle and Audrey dominated the event. Kyle sat at the head of the table, a position always reserved for our father, and directed conversation like a conductor with an orchestra. Every topic somehow circled back to wedding plans. Kyle's detailed descriptions of the venue his parents had secured, the Michelin-starred chef catering the reception, the custom tuxedos for the groomsmen. My parents nodded along enthusiastically, seeming almost grateful for his takeover of what should have been primarily Audrey's decisions. When I gently asked Audrey about her thoughts on the centerpieces, Kyle answered before she could open her mouth. Audrey trusts my judgment on the aesthetic elements, he said dismissively. She's more concerned with the guest experience. My sister, who had once spent hours arranging flowers for our mother's birthday, just nodded along. When I mentioned a local florist who did beautiful work, my suggestion was immediately shut down. We're using my cousin's company, Kyle interjected. They do events for celebrities. It's already arranged. Throughout the dinner, I noticed how everyone deferred to Kyle. My parents asked his opinion on everything from wine selection to table arrangements. Audrey remained mostly silent, smiling and agreeing with whatever Kyle proposed. When I tried to engage her directly, Kyle would answer on her behalf or Audrey would look to him before responding, as if seeking permission. I left the dinner feeling more sidelined than ever, wondering if I even knew my sister anymore. The discovery about the bachelorette party came through Instagram. I was scrolling through my feed when I saw a post from our cousin Heather, so excited to plan this bachelorette weekend for at Audrey Taylor. #BrideTribe, #LastFling. My heart sank. Not only had I not been asked to help plan the event traditionally, the maid of honor's responsibility, but from the comments, it was clear I hadn't even been invited. I sent Heather a private message, trying to sound casual, asking about the plans. Her reply was awkward but revealing. "Oh, I thought you knew. Kyle's sister Jasmine is organizing everything. I think they're trying to keep it small. Just the bridesmaids and a few of Kyle's female friends from work." A quick check of the proposed dates confirmed my suspicion. The bachelorette weekend was scheduled for my birthday. The overlap couldn't be coincidental. When I called another cousin who was invited, she uncomfortably admitted that my name had been specifically discussed and removed from the guest list at Jasmine's insistence. To find out about my exclusion through social media rather than from my own sister was devastating. I waited a day to calm down before asking Audrey to meet for coffee, hoping we could clear the air. The coffee shop was busy that afternoon, filled with the hum of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. Audrey arrived 20 minutes late, already looking defensive. "Is this about the bachelorette?" she asked before even sitting down. "Because Jasmine is handling that, not me." I took a deep breath. "I just want to understand what's happening, Audrey. First the bridal party, now this. It's like I'm being systematically removed from your wedding." "Don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "Not everything is about you, Madison. This is my wedding." Our conversation quickly escalated. As I tried to express my hurt, Audrey became increasingly agitated. "You're making this all about yourself," she finally snapped, loud enough that nearby patrons turned to look. "This is exactly what Kyle said would happen." "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Kyle said you couldn't stand not being the center of attention," she hissed. "That you'd try to make my wedding about your feelings." I stared at her, shocked by the venom in her voice. "Is that really what you think of me? After everything we've been through together?" "I think you're jealous," she said coldly. "You've always had to be the successful one, the smart one. The one everyone admires. Well, now it's my turn. I'm getting married to an amazing man who adores me, and you can't stand it." "Audrey, I think Kyle is isolating you," I said quietly. "From me? From your friends? Can't you see what he's doing?" She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "Kyle was right about you," she said. "You can't be happy for me. You have to tear down anything good in my life." Before I could respond, she stormed out, leaving me sitting alone with 2 untouched coffees and a cafe full of curious onlookers. That night, around midnight, my phone rang. It was Audrey, her voice thick with tears. "Kyle gave me an ultimatum," she sobbed. "He says I have to choose between you and him." My blood ran cold. "Audrey, that's classic manipulative behavior," I said carefully. "He says you're trying to come between us," she continued as if she hadn't heard me. "He says if you're at the wedding at all, it shows I don't respect him." "What do you want, Audrey?" I asked softly. "I want you to apologize to Kyle," she said. "Just tell him you're sorry for being judgmental and that you'll support our relationship fully." "Apologize for what exactly?" I asked. "For caring about you? For worrying when I see red flags? See? There you go again," she cried. "Calling our relationship a red flag. Why can't you just be happy for me?" The call ended with Audrey telling me that if I couldn't apologize to Kyle, I shouldn't bother coming to the wedding at all. Her final words before hanging up shattered my heart. "Kyle is right. You don't really love me. You just want to control me." The next day, both our parents called. Their message was clear: fix things with Audrey. Make peace with Kyle. Keep the family harmony intact at all costs. "Madison, just apologize," my mother pleaded. "What does it cost you? Your pride? Is that worth losing your sister? Your sister only gets married once." My father added, "Don't ruin this special time for her. Just let her have her day." When I tried to explain my concerns about Kyle's controlling behavior, they brushed them aside. "Every man gets a little protective before his wedding," my father said dismissively. "It's natural." "You always were the stubborn one," my mother sighed. "Always had to be right. Can't you just let it go this once?" It became painfully clear that everyone expected me to sacrifice my dignity, to apologize for non-existent offenses, to pretend I didn't see the dangerous dynamics at play. The family peacekeeper role I'd occupied my entire life had never felt so suffocating. That night, I sat on my floor surrounded by family photo albums, tears streaming down my face. Years of memories. Years of being there for Audrey, of putting her needs first, of supporting her through every challenge. And now I was being cast as the villain in her story, all because I could see what Kyle was doing to her. I deleted the family group chat from my phone. Canceled plans to help my mother with wedding errands. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth. I had always been expected to sacrifice for Audrey. To be the responsible one, the supportive one, the one who stepped aside so Audrey could shine. This was just the most extreme version of a dynamic that had existed our entire lives. Alone in my apartment that night, I found myself browsing travel websites. First casually, then with increasing intent. When a deal for a Bali vacation appeared on my screen, something clicked inside me. I checked the dates. The package covered the entire week of Audrey's wedding. My finger hovered over the Book Now button for several long moments. Then, with a sense of both terror and liberation, I clicked. Confirmation emails flooded my inbox. Flight details, villa reservation, airport transfers, day trips and excursions. I had done it. I had chosen myself over the family drama for the first time in my life. I told only Grace about my plans, swearing her to secrecy. Her response was a tight hug and 4 words that validated my decision: "You deserve this escape." The final family gathering before the wedding was a dinner celebrating our mother's birthday. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Audrey and I exchanged stiff greetings, but otherwise avoided direct interaction. Kyle, however, seemed to be everywhere, monopolizing conversations and ensuring he was the center of attention. He regaled the table with stories about his recent promotion, the luxury honeymoon he was planning as a surprise for Audrey, the connections he had with various celebrities who might attend the wedding. My parents hung on his every word, laughing too loudly at his jokes, complimenting his choices, treating him like visiting royalty rather than the man who was driving a wedge through their family. Throughout the evening, relatives awkwardly asked about my role in the wedding, clearly unaware of the ongoing drama. Each time, Kyle would smoothly interject with vague comments about keeping the wedding party intimate or venue restrictions limiting participation. Each explanation was delivered with a sympathetic glance in my direction that made my skin crawl. 2 days after the birthday dinner, the official wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. The heavy cream envelope contained an elegantly designed card inviting me to the ceremony at St. Michael's Church at 2 p.m. What was conspicuously missing was any mention of the reception at the Grand Hamilton Hotel afterward. Instead, a handwritten note had been slipped into the envelope due to venue restrictions. "We've had to limit reception attendance. We hope you understand. Love, A.N.K." I might have believed the excuse if our cousin Patricia hadn't called that same evening, excited about the welcome bags for out-of-town guests and the 10-piece band Kyle had booked for the reception. When I carefully inquired about the venue restrictions, she seemed confused. "Restrictions? The ballroom holds 300 people. They've invited Kyle's entire extended family, even second cousins he's never met. His college fraternity brothers are all coming with +1s. There are no restrictions." The confirmation that I had been deliberately excluded from the reception while distant connections of Kyle's were welcomed was the final straw. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house, invitation and note in hand, determined to confront the situation head-on. I found my parents, Audrey, and Kyle having lunch on the patio. Without preamble, I placed the invitation on the table. "Would someone like to explain why I'm only invited to the ceremony?" I asked quietly. My mother looked uncomfortable. "Your sister explained about the venue restrictions." "Except there are no restrictions," I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The Grand Hamilton can hold 300 guests. Patricia told me Kyle's bringing fraternity brothers I've never even heard him mention." Kyle cleared his throat. "This is exactly why we limited your involvement, Madison. You create drama around every decision." I pulled out my phone, showing them Patricia's text confirming the lack of space limitations. Audrey had the decency to look embarrassed, but Kyle merely shrugged. "Fine," he said coldly. You want the truth? I don't want you at our reception. You've been negative about our relationship from day one. The ceremony is already public, so we can't exclude you without people talking, but the reception is our celebration. I want Audrey to enjoy it without your judgmental presence. The naked honesty was almost refreshing after months of manipulation and excuses. I looked at Audrey, waiting for her to defend me, to express shock at Kyle's admission. Instead, she stared at her plate. Kyle is my future, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't start our marriage with this tension. Maybe it's better if you just come to the ceremony. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The reception venue is being paid for by Kyle's parents, he offered weakly. It's their right to. To exclude your daughter? I finished for him. My voice breaking. After everything I've done for this family, for Audrey? Years of supporting Audrey, of putting her first, of being the dependable daughter came crashing down around me. I felt something break inside as I looked at my family sitting there, unwilling to stand up for me. You're ruining everything, Audrey suddenly burst out. Every part of wedding planning has been overshadowed by your drama. Why can't you just be happy for me? Drama? I repeated incredulously. I've been systematically excluded from every aspect of your wedding. I've been insulted, manipulated, and now uninvited from your reception. And am creating drama by being hurt? You've always been like this, Audrey spat. Always so dramatic. Always making everything about you. Kyle pulled out his phone, ostentatiously texting someone before announcing. You're toxic to our happiness, Madison. Always have been. I looked at my parents, silently pleading for support. They avoided my eyes. My mother reached for my hand, her expression pleading. Can't you just go along with it for one day? She asked softly. For family harmony? My father nodded in agreement. Just show up to the ceremony, be pleasant, and then leave quietly. Is that so much to ask? Later that day, messages poured in. My grandmother called, asking me to be the bigger person. Family friends texted, urging reconciliation. Everyone had the same message. Just go along with it. Swallow your pride. Accept the mistreatment. Keep the peace. That evening, I finalized my Bali travel details. Paid the remaining balance on the villa. Submitted my request for 2 weeks off work. Arranged for Grace to water my plants and collect my mail. I composed a brief, factual email to my family explaining that I would not be attending the wedding. I did not mention Bali or any specific destination, merely stating that I would be away and unreachable during that time. I set my email to out of office and my phone voicemail to indicate I would be unavailable. The night before my departure, I packed my suitcase with shaking hands. Sunscreen, summer dresses, hiking sandals, bathing suits. I played empowering music loudly, trying to drown out the voice in my head questioning if I was making a terrible mistake. I placed my family contact numbers on a temporary block list, not permanently cutting them off, just creating space for myself to breathe, to think, to heal. As I locked my apartment door the next morning, suitcase in hand, I felt a surreal mixture of terror and freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I was choosing my own well-being over family expectations. It felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The 14-hour flight to Bali gave me plenty of time to question my decision. As passengers around me slept or watched movies, I stared out the window at the endless sky, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. My family would be furious. The wedding was just 5 days away. What kind of person abandoned their sister right before her wedding? No matter how hurtful the circumstances? Yet another voice inside me kept asking, what kind of sister excludes you from her wedding? What kind of parents stand by and let it happen? What kind of family expects you to accept mistreatment with a smile? By the time the plane touched down in Denpasar, exhaustion had overwhelmed my anxiety. I made it through customs in a daze, found my arranged driver, and barely registered the lush tropical landscape passing by the car window. My villa was more beautiful than the pictures had shown. Set on a cliff overlooking the ocean, it offered complete privacy, a small infinity pool, and the constant sound of waves breaking on the shore below. Under different circumstances, it would have been paradise. That first night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching distant lightning over the ocean and crying until I had no tears left. I had traveled halfway around the world, but the pain had simply packed itself in my suitcase and come along for the ride. The next morning, however, something shifted. I woke before dawn and, on impulse, wrapped myself in a blanket and walked down to the small private beach access from my villa. As the sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. In that moment of perfect natural beauty, my family drama seemed very far away and somehow less important. At breakfast in the resort's open-air restaurant, I found myself seated at a community table with other travelers. A woman about my age introduced herself as Isabella, another American traveling solo. "First time in Bali?" she asked, passing me a plate of tropical fruit. "First time traveling alone, period," I admitted. She smiled knowingly. "Running to or running from?" The question caught me off guard. "Both, I suppose." Isabella nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Best reason to travel. You'll find yourself when you're not looking." Over papaya and coffee, Isabella told me about her own journey. 3 years ago, she had walked away from her family after decades of emotional manipulation. Now she traveled regularly, building a life on her own terms. "Families are like gravity," she said thoughtfully. "They have a pull on us that feels like a law of nature. But sometimes you have to break that law to find out who you really are." At another table, a group of Australian tourists overheard our conversation and invited us to join them for dinner that evening. Their easy acceptance and lack of judgment was refreshing after months of family tension. That afternoon, I met Wei-Yin, a local tour guide who offered wisdom along with information about the island. As he showed me a nearby temple, he spoke about Balinese philosophy. "In our tradition, family is sacred," he explained. "But so is the individual spirit. When one harms the other, both suffer. Sometimes distance creates room for healing." Over the next few days, I found myself saying yes to experiences I would normally have avoided. I joined a hiking group trekking to a hidden waterfall, scrambling over rocks and wading through streams until we reached a pristine pool surrounded by lush vegetation. I attended sunrise yoga sessions on the beach, learning to focus on my breath rather than my swirling thoughts. I participated in a traditional Balinese cooking class, laughing with strangers as we fumbled with unfamiliar ingredients. With each new experience, I felt layers of tension and hurt begin to peel away. The constant knot in my stomach loosened. The headaches that had plagued me for months diminished. I slept deeply for the first time since the bridal party announcement. One afternoon, I sat on the beach with my journal, forcing myself to honestly examine the patterns in my relationship with Audrey and my parents. I had always been the responsible one, the one who fixed problems, who sacrificed without complaint. Audrey had always been indulged, protected, allowed to put herself first. Our parents had enabled this dynamic our entire lives, praising me for my selflessness while never expecting the same from Audrey. Kyle's controlling behavior hadn't emerged from nowhere. He had simply exploited a family system that already placed Audrey's needs and wishes above mine. His isolation tactics worked because my family was primed to see my independence as a threat rather than a strength. After that first day of messages and missed calls, I turned off my phone completely. The freedom from constantly checking for family contact was intoxicating. I began to experience what my meditation instructor called present moment awareness, fully engaging with each experience rather than having one foot in Bali and one foot in family drama back home. Physical symptoms I hadn't even recognized as stress-related began to disappear. The persistent tightness in my jaw, the constant nervous stomach, the automatic flinch when my phone chimed with notifications. My body had been carrying my emotional burden. And as I released the obligation to manage my family's feelings, it began to heal. On my 5th day in Bali, I found myself genuinely laughing at a joke told by one of my new Australian friends. The sound surprised me. It had been so long since ID experienced uncomplicated joy, since ID made a decision without calculating its impact on family harmony. since ID simply existed in a moment without anxiety about the future. I found myself growing more assertive in small ways. When a market vendor tried to overcharge another tourist, I stepped in to negotiate a fair price. In group discussions about excursion options, I voiced my preferences clearly rather than deferring to others. When asked personal questions by new acquaintances, I answered honestly rather than providing the sanitized version of my life I usually offered. Isabella and I grew closer, our morning coffee becoming a ritual where we discussed everything from family dynamics to career aspirations to favorite books. She understood what I was going through in a way even Grace, with all her good intentions, couldn't fully grasp. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop playing the role they've assigned you, she told me one morning. It's uncomfortable for everyone at first. But if there's anything healthy there to salvage, it can only happen when you stand in your truth. I sent a single photo to Grace. Not the standard tourist shot of me posing in front of a temple or sunset, but a candid moment captured by Isabella. In it, I was laughing unreservedly, eyes crinkled with genuine joy, looking more relaxed than I had in years. The only caption was, "Finding myself in the lost luggage department." Grace's response was immediate, "There you are. I've missed this, Madison." On my 8th day in Bali, at a group dinner with fellow travelers I'd met during various excursions, I found myself sharing the full story of Audrey, Kyle, and my family's betrayal. These virtual strangers listened without judgment, offered perspective without platitudes, and supported without smothering. Their unanimous verdict that I had made the right decision to remove myself from a toxic situation provided validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. That night, in the privacy of my villa, I cried again. Not tears of hurt or anger this time, but tears of release. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. I no longer felt the desperate need for my family's approval or understanding. For the first time in my life, I was defining myself rather than allowing my role in the family to define me. It was, I realized as I drifted off to sleep to the sound of waves breaking on the shore, the beginning of true freedom. On the 7th day of my Bali retreat, curiosity finally overcame my determination to remain disconnected. The wedding would have happened yesterday. Had Audrey gone through with it? Was my family furious with me? Had my absence created the drama I'd been accused of causing? I sat cross-legged on my villa balcony, watching the sunrise as I turned my phone back on. The cascade of notifications was immediate and overwhelming. 47 missed calls from my parents. 23 from Audrey. Their timestamps showing increasing frequency and urgency. Dozens of text messages, the tone evolving from angry to concerned to desperate. My thumb hovered over the voicemail icon. Hesitation battling with concern. Finally, I pressed it, selecting the most recent message from Grace first, needing a friendly voice before diving into family communications. Madison. I know you're off the grid and that's good, but when you get this, call me. The wedding. Well, there was no wedding. Kyle was caught with Jessica the afternoon of the ceremony, in the bridal suite, while Audrey was getting her makeup done downstairs. It's bad, Mads. Really bad. Your family is trying to reach you. Call me when you can. I sat frozen, Grace's words repeating in my mind. No wedding. Kyle and Jessica. The bridal suite. It was so cliché it would have been laughable if it weren't so devastating. Jessica had been one of the bridesmaids, a colleague of Kyle's who Audrey had included to please him. I had met her briefly at the bridal party announcement dinner, noted her flirtatious behavior with Kyle, and filed it away as yet another concerning detail no one wanted to hear about. I scrolled through more messages. From my mother, Madison, please call us. Audrey needs you. From my father. This family needs to come together right now. Your sister is devastated. From various relatives, where are you? Audrey is asking for you. The wedding is off. Kyle is despicable. We should have listened to you. Finally, I listened to a voicemail from Audrey herself, time-stamped just hours after the wedding should have occurred. Maddie. Her voice came through broken and barely recognizable through sobs. You were right. About everything. Kyle was. Jessica was, she hiccuped, unable to complete the sentence. I need my big sister. Please call me. Please. I pieced together the full story through various messages. Audrey had been in a separate room getting her makeup done when she realized she'd forgotten the special handkerchief our grandmother had given her. She went to the bridal suite to retrieve it, only to find Kyle and Jessica in an unmistakably intimate embrace. According to my cousin's detailed account, Audrey had broken down in front of everyone. Kyle had made a scene, blaming Audrey for being too focused on the wedding and neglecting him. Guests had witnessed the entire meltdown. Kyle had eventually left with Jessica, the videographer capturing his departure for posterity. The deposits had been lost, the honeymoon canceled, the gifts returned, and everyone, absolutely everyone, was trying to reach me. As I absorbed this information, I experienced a complex wave of emotions. My first reaction, I'm ashamed to admit, was a flash of vindication. I had seen Kyle's true character from the beginning. I had tried to warn Audrey. I had been right all along. This shameful satisfaction was quickly replaced by guilt. How could I feel even a moment's satisfaction at something that had caused my sister such pain? What kind of person was I becoming? Then came genuine concern for Audrey's emotional state. Despite everything, she was my sister. I knew how devastated she must be, how humiliated, how broken. A part of me wanted to book the next flight home, to be the supportive big sister I had always been. Yet underneath these reactions was a simmering anger at my family. They had dismissed my concerns, belittled my feelings, and chosen Kyle over me repeatedly. Now that I had been proven right, they expected me to drop everything and rush home to pick up the pieces. The old pattern reasserting itself. Madison will fix it. Madison will support everyone. Madison will set aside her own needs. And finally, cutting through all these conflicting emotions was a profound sense of relief. Relief that I was physically removed from the drama. Relief that I didn't have to navigate the immediate aftermath in person. Relief that I had this distance to process my own feelings before engaging with my family's expectations. A flurry of new messages arrived as news of my response to Grace spread through the family grapevine. My parents insisted I return immediately. Audrey begged for my support and comfort. Relatives suggested I could have prevented the disaster somehow if I had been present, implying that my absence had contributed to the catastrophe. The old Madison would have immediately booked a flight home, would have rushed to Audrey's side, offering comfort and support while neglecting her own needs. Would have stepped right back into the role of family fixer, emotional support, problem solver. But I wasn't the old Madison anymore. I consulted Isabella about maintaining boundaries while still showing compassion. I called my boss and requested an additional week of leave, which was granted without hesitation given the circumstances. Then I crafted a measured response to my family, explaining that while I was deeply sorry for Audrey's pain, I would be continuing my trip as planned and would be available to talk when I returned. The response was predictably dramatic. My mother couldn't understand how I could be so selfish when my sister needed me. My father insisted family came first in a crisis. Audrey sent tearful voice messages saying she needed her big sister. I held firm. I would return as scheduled in 1 week. I would support Audrey then, but on new terms. Our relationship would need to be rebuilt with mutual respect and boundaries. I would no longer sacrifice my well-being to fix problems or manage emotions that weren't mine to manage. It was the first time in my life I had maintained a boundary with my family during a crisis. The first time I had prioritized my own healing over their immediate demands. It felt both terrifying and necessary, like removing a bandage that had been applied too tightly, allowing blood to flow back into a numbed limb. Painful, but essential for healing. I spent the remaining days of my vacation processing my own emotions about the wedding disaster. I practiced meditation techniques I'd learned in Bali to stay centered when reading family messages. I discussed healthy boundaries with Isabella and other travelers who'd navigated similar family dynamics. I prepared myself mentally for the return home and the inevitable confrontations that would follow. One morning near the end of my stay, I sat on the beach and wrote a letter to Audrey that I had no intention of sending. In it, I expressed everything I felt, my hurt at her exclusion of me, My anger at her choosing Kyle over our lifelong bond, my sadness at the distance between us, but also my hope that this painful experience might eventually lead to growth for her, and perhaps a healthier relationship between us. The act of writing without censoring myself, without considering how my words would impact others, was incredibly freeing. I realized how much of my life had been spent filtering my thoughts and feelings through the lens of others' reactions. How rarely I had allowed myself the simple authenticity of owning my own experience without apology. On my final night in Bali, I had dinner with the friends I'd made during my stay. Isabella and the Australian group, Wei-Yin and his wife, the yoga instructor, and several fellow students. We shared a feast of local specialties at a beachfront restaurant, exchanged contact information, and promised to stay in touch. As we watched the sunset together, Isabella squeezed my hand. "You're not the same woman who arrived 2 weeks ago," she observed. "You found your spine in Bali." I laughed. "Along with a questionable batik skirt and too many seashells." "Bring it all home," she advised seriously. "Especially the spine. You're going to need it." I knew she was right. The real test would begin when I returned home, when I had to maintain my new boundaries in person. When I had to rebuild relationships on new terms rather than falling back into comfortable but unhealthy patterns. As I packed my suitcase the next morning, I carefully wrapped the small Buddha statue I'd purchased at a local market. The seller had told me it represented equanimity, the ability to stay balanced and calm regardless of external circumstances. It seemed an appropriate souvenir for this transformative journey. Whatever awaited me at home, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer willing to disappear myself to make others comfortable. That Madison had been left behind in Bali, replaced by a woman who understood her own worth beyond her usefulness to family. The flight home felt significantly shorter than the journey to Bali. Perhaps because this time, instead of running away from a painful situation, I was moving forward into a new chapter of my life with clarity and purpose. I spent the hours planning how to approach the inevitable family reconciliation, setting clear boundaries in my mind, preparing for resistance, but determined to maintain my new sense of self. Grace was waiting at the airport, her familiar face a welcome sight after 2 weeks among strangers. She hugged me tightly, then held me at arm's length, studying me with a smile. "You look different," she said. "More, you." "I feel different," I admitted as we walked to her car. "Stronger. Clearer." During the drive to my apartment, Grace filled me in on the aftermath of the non-wedding. Audrey had moved temporarily back to our parents' house, devastated by Kyle's betrayal and public humiliation. Kyle's parents had disappeared from the picture entirely, embarrassed by their son's behavior. The wedding vendors had been mostly understanding, though the financial losses were substantial. "She's been asking for you every day," Grace said carefully. "They all have." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'll call them tomorrow. Tonight I need to settle in, adjust to the time difference." Grace respected my need for space, helping me unpack and ordering takeout before leaving me to rest. I spent that evening in the quiet comfort of my apartment, reacclimating to my own space, preparing mentally for the conversations to come. The next morning I texted Audrey, suggesting we meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop we'd both always liked, but that held no particular significance in our relationship. She agreed immediately. When I arrived, Audrey was already there, looking smaller somehow, diminished by recent events. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her usual polished appearance replaced by sweatpants and a ponytail. The sight of her pain pierced my heart despite everything that had happened between us. She burst into tears the moment I sat down. "Maddie, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "You were right about Kyle. About everything. I was horrible to you. I chose him over you. I can't believe I did that." I passed her a napkin, giving her time to compose herself. When her sobs subsided, I spoke carefully. "What happened with Kyle was terrible, and I'm truly sorry you're hurting. But Audrey, we need to talk about what happened between us too. That can't just be erased, because Kyle turned out to be even worse than I thought." She nodded miserably. "I know. I let him come between us. I believed all his lies about you being controlling and jealous. I abandoned you when you were just trying to protect me. Kyle was manipulative, I acknowledged. He used classic isolation tactics. But Audrey, you went along with it. You excluded me from your wedding. You repeated his accusations. You chose him over our relationship again and again. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how you can ever forgive me. I reached across the table to take her hand. Forgiveness isn't the issue. I love you and I forgive you. But trust is something different. That has to be rebuilt. We spent 2 hours in that coffee shop, having the most honest conversation of our adult lives. Audrey admitted she'd been flattered by Kyle's possessiveness, interpreting it as love rather than control. She acknowledged that she'd enjoyed the power dynamic shifting between us, finally being the sister who knew better. She confessed that part of her had believed Kyle's accusations that I was jealous of their relationship. In turn, I admitted that I had sometimes been overprotective, that I had resented Kyle's influence over her, that my concern, while justified, hadn't always been expressed in the most constructive way. I acknowledged that our relationship had fallen into patterns established in childhood that weren't necessarily healthy for either of us. By the time we left, both emotionally exhausted but somehow lighter, we had the beginnings of a plan to rebuild our relationship. Not as it had been, with me as protector and Audrey as protected, but as equal adults with mutual respect and healthy boundaries. The conversation with our parents was more challenging. I met them at their home the following day, steeling myself as I walked through the front door. They embraced me with relief and what seemed like genuine contrition, but old patterns emerged almost immediately. "We're so glad you're back," my mother said. "Audrey has been lost without you." I sat them down in the living room, determined to address the deeper issues. "This isn't just about Kyle's betrayal," I explained. "This is about how this family functions. About how you both enabled his isolation of Audrey, how you pressured me to accept mistreatment for the sake of family harmony." My father looked uncomfortable but nodded slowly. "We should have listened to your concerns about Kyle," he admitted. "We were so focused on the wedding, on making everything perfect, that we missed what was happening right in front of us." "It wasn't just Kyle," I pressed. "It's been our dynamic for years. Audrey gets what she wants. I'm expected to accommodate. You both reinforce it." My mother started to protest, then stopped herself, a look of realization crossing her face. "When you put it that way," she said quietly, "I suppose we've always expected more from you because you seemed so capable. And less from Audrey because she seemed more fragile," my father added. That admission, simple as it was, felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, my parents were seeing the pattern that had shaped our family relationships for decades. The conversation continued for hours, delving into painful territory, but necessary for genuine healing. My parents acknowledged their role in enabling both Kyle's control of Audrey and the unhealthy dynamics between their daughters. I expressed my hurt at their failure to support me, to see my pain, to stand up for me when I was being pushed out of the wedding. By the end, there were tears all around. But also a new understanding. My father, who rarely showed emotion, hugged me tightly before I left. "I'm sorry we didn't have your back, Madison," he said gruffly. "That won't happen again." In the weeks that followed, I worked on establishing new boundaries with my family. I declined invitations that didn't work for my schedule, even when my mother used her disappointed voice. I expressed opinions that contradicted family consensus without apologizing. I maintained my separate life while gradually rebuilding connections on healthier terms. I suggested family therapy, expecting resistance, but finding cautious acceptance instead. Our first session was awkward but productive, giving us a neutral space to continue the difficult conversations we'd begun. Audrey and I started a new tradition of weekly walks rather than returning to our brunches. Something about moving forward side by side rather than sitting face to face made our conversations more honest, less performative. We discussed her healing process, how she was coming to terms with Kyle's betrayal and her own vulnerability to his manipulation. I shared insights from my time in Bali, the perspective I'd gained on our family dynamics and my own patterns. Slowly, a new kind of sisterhood began to emerge between us. Not the idealized closeness of our childhood, nor the unbalanced dynamic of our early adulthood, but something more authentic. We disagreed sometimes without it threatening our connection. We respected each other's boundaries. We began to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. I maintained contact with Isabella through regular video calls, finding her outside perspective invaluable as I navigated the changing family landscape. She listened without judgment as I reported progress and setbacks, offering insights from her own journey of family reconciliation. Maybe next year you can come visit, I suggested during one call. Meet Audrey. See if you two get along. I'd like that, she replied. From everything you've told me, she's finding her own strength now. That's worth witnessing. I applied lessons learned in Bali to my daily life back home. The meditation practice that centered me. The ability to recognize unhealthy patterns in relationships. The courage to express my needs directly rather than swallowing them for the sake of peace. The understanding that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for authentic connection. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Audrey moved into her own apartment. A step toward independence shed delayed while with Kyle. I helped her decorate, our easy cooperation a sign of healing in our relationship. As we arranged furniture and hung pictures, she paused, looking at me with unexpected seriousness. You know what I realized recently? She said. All those years, I thought you were the strong one and I was the weak one. But strength isn't about never needing help. It's about knowing when to ask for it and when to give it. We're both strong in different ways. I hugged her, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Our journey was far from complete, but we were moving in the right direction, building something new from the painful lessons of the past. The Buddha statue from Bali sits on my desk now. A daily reminder of the equanimity I continue to cultivate. It reminds me that self-respect isn't selfish, that boundaries aren't barriers, that authentic love requires truth rather than sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not rushing in to fix someone else's pain, but standing firm in your own truth, creating space for genuine healing rather than temporary comfort. Sometimes the family you rebuild after devastation is stronger than the one you thought was perfect. And sometimes, the longest journey you take isn't across oceans, but from who you were told to be to who you truly are. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? What boundaries have you set in your own relationships? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sometimes the most loving choice you can make for everyone involved.